He was a ghost before he was a corpse, a man so meticulously erased from the world that even his own clothes held no clue to his name. On the first day of summer 1948, he was found dead on an Australian beach, propped against a seawall as if resting. He was dressed in a pristine suit and tie, his shoes polished, an unsmoked cigarette resting on his collar. But every single label had been snipped away. Every pocket was empty. He was a perfect, impenetrable enigma, a man who had been deliberately turned into a blank slate. This wasn't just a death, it was a statement. And it would ignite a Cold War mystery that would haunt investigators for over 70 years, leaving a chilling void where the truth should be. Welcome to The Dark Historian, where the truth is darker than any myth. The year is 1948. The world is holding its breath, caught in the silent, freezing grip of the new Cold War. The ashes of the Second World War are still warm, but new battle lines are being drawn, not in trenches, but in whispers and shadows. In this new world of secrets, Australia is no longer a distant outpost. It is a critical piece on the global chessboard. Just a few hundred kilometers from the quiet city of Adelaide, the Woomera prohibited area is being established, a top-secret weapons testing range for the British military. It is a place of guided missiles and atomic ambitions, a magnet for the intelligence agencies of both the West and the Soviet Union. The air in Adelaide is thick with more than just the salt of the Southern Ocean. It is thick with paranoia. Every foreign accent, every unfamiliar face is a potential threat. It is into this world of suspicion that our story begins, on the calm, pale sands of Somerton Beach. At dawn on December 1st, the scene is deceptively peaceful. The gentle tide laps at the shore, the sky bleeds from grey into a soft yellow. A local man walking his horse notices a figure slumped against the stone breakwater. He'd seen him the night before, gesturing with his arm as if lighting a cigarette, and assumed he was simply a drunk sleeping it off. But the morning light reveals a stark stillness. The man is in the exact same position. His head is tilted back, resting on the seawall. His legs are crossed, his feet pointing towards the ocean. He is dressed for a formal evening, not a night on the beach. A white shirt, a red and blue tie, a brown double-breasted suit jacket. He looks, for all the world, like a man who has simply fallen into a deep, final sleep. Police are called to the scene. Their initial assessment is routine. No obvious signs of violence, no struggle, perhaps a heart attack or suicide. They begin the standard procedure of identification. They check his pockets for a wallet, for keys, for a letter. They find nothing. Not a single coin, not a stray match. Just a pack of Army Club cigarettes, with one expensive Kensitas brand cigarette strangely placed inside, a box of matches, a used bus ticket to a nearby suburb, and an unused second-class rail ticket. There is no name, no address, no way to connect this body to the living world. It is only when the body is moved to the morgue that the true, chilling nature of the mystery reveals itself. As the mortician's assistant begins to remove the man's clothing, he notices something odd. The manufacturer's tag on the tie has been neatly cut off. He checks the suit jacket. The labels are gone. He checks the trousers, the shirt, even the man's socks and underwear. Every single piece of identifying material has been painstakingly, deliberately removed with a pair of scissors. This was not a robbery. A thief takes a wallet but leaves the labels. This was something else entirely. This was a professional erasure, an act designed to make a man anonymous in death. The police were no longer investigating a simple passing. They were staring at the shell of a man who had been systematically disconnected from his own existence, leaving them with a single, terrifying question: who was he, and who wanted him forgotten? The body was moved to the morgue, a cold, sterile environment that offered no more clues than the beach. On the slab, under the harsh glare of an examination lamp, the man's secrets were supposed to be laid bare. The pathologist, Dr. John Burton Cleland, began his work, but what he found only deepened the enigma. This was not the body of a vagrant or an unfortunate soul lost to the elements. This was a man in peak physical condition. His hands were soft and unmarked by manual labor. His teeth were in perfect order. His organs were textbook examples of health. There was evidence of congestion in the brain and stomach, a slight enlargement of the spleen, all classic signs of poisoning. But the toxicology reports came back empty. Every test for known poisons yielded nothing. The frustration in the morgue was palpable. They had a body, a death, but no cause. Dr. Cleland could only state the obvious and the impossible. The man was dead, but there was nothing medically wrong with him. He suspected a poison so sophisticated, so exotic, that it left no trace, breaking down in the body before it could be identified. A poison that could kill without a whisper. This theory shifted the investigation from a tragic accident to a potential assassination. Who had access to such a substance in 1948, and who would use it on a man left on a public beach? Adding to the strangeness were the man's calf muscles. They were unusually high and well developed, like those of a ballet dancer or a long-distance runner who ran on their toes. It was a specific, peculiar detail on a body that was otherwise a complete blank. Months bled into one another. The Somerton man, as the press now called him, remained a ghost. The police, desperate, had a plaster cast made of his head and shoulders. This hauntingly lifelike bust was displayed at public venues, its vacant eyes staring out from behind glass cases, silently pleading for recognition. Thousands of people filed past, morbidly curious, but no one knew him. He was a face without a name, a man from nowhere. The investigation was a dead end, the trail as cold as the corpse in the city morgue. The man was a phantom, and it seemed he would remain one forever. Then, on January 14, 1949, a breakthrough. A brown suitcase was discovered in the cloakroom of the Adelaide railway station, just a short walk from the beach where the body was found. It had been checked in on November 30th, the day before the man's estimated time of death. The tag had been torn off. Inside, investigators found a collection of items that were both mundane and deeply unsettling. A dressing gown, slippers, trousers, an electrician's screwdriver, and a stenciling brush, the kind used for marking cargo on ships. Every single item of clothing had its identification tags meticulously cut out, just like the clothes on the body. This was the work of the same hand, a systematic campaign of identity erasure. But the ghost had made a mistake. Buried within the suitcase was a spool of orange wax-coated thread, a brand called Barber, which was not available for purchase in Australia at the time. It was an import, a foreign object in a sea of anonymity. Forensic examiners took the trousers found on the dead man's body and looked closer. They found a small repair in the pocket lining. Under a microscope, the thread used for that repair was compared to the thread from the suitcase. It was a perfect match. The color, the twist, the wax coating, identical. This was it. The first concrete link. The suitcase belonged to the Somerton man. The police now had his possessions, but they were no closer to his name. They had simply found a box of secrets belonging to a man who was a secret himself. 4 months of silence. 4 months of a cold, nameless body preserved in formalin, its skin waxy, and its identity locked behind a permanent stare. The investigation was not just cold. The Somerton man was becoming a ghost story, a local legend whispered in hushed tones. But history is not moved by ghosts. It is moved by obsession. On April 14, 1949, Professor John Burton Cleland, a pathologist of immense repute, decided to look again. He was a man who believed that evidence always left a trace, no matter how faint. He laid out the dead man's clothing once more on a sterile metal table. The scent of mothballs and stale fabric filled the small examination room. Cleland's experienced hands ran over the cheap material of the trousers, feeling for imperfections, for anything his predecessors might have missed. And then he found it. A small, hard lump sewn into the waistband, so skillfully concealed it felt like a natural part of the garment. It was a fob pocket, a tiny pouch for a pocket watch, but this one was different. It had been stitched shut from the inside. With surgical precision, Cleland snipped the threads. He reached inside with forceps and pulled out a tiny, tightly rolled cylinder of paper, no bigger than a matchstick. Slowly, carefully, he unrolled the delicate scrap. On it were 2 printed words, elegant and forensic, Tamam, Shud. The phrase was a lightning strike in the dark. It was Persian. A quick consultation with experts at the public library revealed its origin. It was the final phrase from a book of 12th century poems, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The meaning was as simple as it was chilling: it is ended. Or it is finished. Was this a suicide note, the most concise in history? A final poetic declaration of despair? Or was it a signal, the end of a mission? The police now had a clue that was more profound and more unsettling than anything found in the man's suitcase. It wasn't just an object, it was a message. The discovery ignited a firestorm. Police launched a nationwide appeal, plastering the phrase Shud in newspapers across Australia. They begged the public, check your copies of the Rubaiyat. Does any copy have its final page torn out? The request was a desperate long shot, a search for one specific book among tens of thousands. For weeks, the appeal yielded nothing but dead ends. Then a man from Glenelg, a suburb of Adelaide, stepped forward. He told a story that seemed too convenient to be true. He said that sometime in late November, right around the time the body was discovered, he found a book tossed into the footwell of his unlocked car. Thinking a stranger had simply misplaced it, he had thrown it into his glove compartment and forgotten about it. Until now, he handed the book to the detectives. It was a rare New Zealand edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The police turned to the last page. It was gone. A jagged tear was all that remained. They brought out the tiny scrap of paper found in the dead man's pocket. They held it to the tear. It was a perfect, undeniable match. They had found his book, but this was not the end of the mystery. It was the beginning of a far deeper one. An officer, examining the back cover under an ultraviolet lamp, saw something that made his blood run cold. Faint pencil markings, almost completely erased, covered the inside board. There were 5 lines of capital letters, a seemingly random jumble of characters that formed an unbreakable code. And beneath the code, something far more immediate, a phone number, an unlisted number belonging to a woman, a nurse, who lived just a few hundred yards from Somerton Beach, the very spot where the body was found. The case had just turned from a lonely death into a conspiracy. Police moved quickly. The address was just a short walk from where the body had lain, a quiet suburban street that held no business being connected to a mystery like this. The woman who answered the door was a nurse, Jessica Thompson. Her name at first meant nothing, but her reaction would mean everything. Investigators brought her to the station, to a cold, sterile room where the evidence was laid out. They didn't show her a photograph. They showed her the death mask, the plaster bust made from the dead man's face. It was a haunting object, a 3-dimensional ghost, capturing the final, placid expression of a man whose identity was a void. The moment her eyes fell upon it, the air in the room turned to ice. It was not a flicker of recognition. It was a physical blow. The color drained from her face, her breath hitched in her throat, and she visibly swayed, one hand flying to her mouth as if to stifle a scream. Detectives noted she seemed on the verge of fainting, her composure utterly shattered. She looked, in their words, completely taken aback, to the point of giving the appearance that she was about to faint. Yet, when they asked the simple, direct question, "Do you know this man?" the wall slammed down. Through a strained, trembling voice, she denied it. She had never seen him, she insisted. Never. The denial was too fast, too absolute. It was the frantic denial of someone staring at a ghost they thought long buried. The police knew she was lying. But why? Under pressure, her story began to fracture. She admitted to one thing. Years ago, during the war, she had owned a copy of the Rubaiyat. She had given it as a gift to a soldier, an army lieutenant named Alfred Boxell. Finally, a name, a concrete lead. The police felt the case cracking open. This had to be him. Boxell was the man on the beach. Thompson's strange behavior, her fear, it all made sense. She was connected to the dead man through this book, a memento of a past relationship she desperately wanted to keep hidden. The search for Alfred Boxell began immediately, a nationwide hunt for a man they believed was already in the morgue. But the truth was far stranger. Alfred Boxell was found. He was alive, well, and working in Sydney. When detectives showed up at his door, he was cooperative but confused. And when they asked him about the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, he walked to his bookshelf and produced his copy. It was the one Jessica Thompson had given him years ago. He opened it for them. Inside, the final page was pristine. The words, Tam and Shud, were nowhere to be found. The book was intact. This wasn't a breakthrough, it was a collapse. The only solid lead had evaporated into thin air. The dead man was not Alfred Boxell, so who was he? And why did Jessica Thompson, a suburban nurse, point them toward a living man when confronted with the face of a dead one? Was it a desperate act of misdirection, a calculated lie to send police on a wild goose chase while the real story remained buried? The mystery no longer revolved around just the body, it now revolved around her. This is where the shadows of the Cold War fall across Somerton Beach. Australia in 1948 was not a quiet backwater. It was a key partner for Britain and the United States, home to the highly sensitive Woomera rocket range, a top-secret weapons testing facility. Intelligence agencies from the Soviet Union and the West swarmed the continent. Spies were not fiction here. They were a fact of life. And in the world of espionage, untraceable men, secret codes, and sudden deaths were simply tools of the trade. The Unbreakable 5-line code in the back of the book suddenly looked less like a lover's scribble and more like a professional cipher. Experts have long argued it has all the hallmarks of a one-time pad, a communication method used by spies that is mathematically impossible to crack without the corresponding key. Was the Somerton man a spy, silenced before he could complete his mission? Was Jessica Thompson his handler? Or was she a rival agent, the last person to see him alive before he was poisoned on that cold, dark beach? Her lie wasn't just the lie of a frightened woman, it was the lie of a professional. Her lie was a wall of granite, impenetrable and cold. Behind it, the truth of the Somerton man was sealed away forever, transforming a police file into a global obsession. For over 70 years, the case has remained a perfect, maddening enigma, a collection of impossible clues that lead everywhere and nowhere. Think of the sheer audacity of it. A man built like an athlete in the prime of his life is found dead on a public beach, his body showing no signs of struggle, no hint of violence. He is a medical specimen whose heart simply stopped beating. His clothes are a void, stripped of every tag, every tailor's mark, every laundry symbol. He is a ghost in a borrowed suit, meticulously scrubbed from existence before he was even dead. In his pocket, a ticket he never used and a book of 11th century Persian poetry. A book containing a secret pocket, a handwritten phone number, and a cryptic sequence of letters that has defied the world's best codebreakers for 3/4 of a century. And at the end of that phone number, a nurse who swore she knew nothing, who looked at a plaster cast of the dead man's face and showed not a flicker of recognition, a denial her own daughter would later call a lie. Each clue is a locked door, each discovery only adds more locks. The Somerton man wasn't just a victim, he was a carefully constructed puzzle designed never to be solved. But time has a way of eroding even the most formidable secrets. In 2022, the silence of the cemetery was broken. Under the authority of the South Australian Police, a team led by Professor Derek Abbott, a man who had dedicated years of his life to this ghost, exhumed the body. They broke ground, digging into the cold earth that had held the mystery for so long. From the degraded remains, from the fragments of bone and dust, they painstakingly extracted a few precious strands of hair. And within those strands, a fragile genetic fingerprint. Using cutting-edge forensic genealogy, they began to build a family tree in reverse, chasing a shadow back through generations of births, deaths, and marriages. And then a breakthrough. After 74 years, the ghost had a name. The evidence, painstakingly assembled, points overwhelmingly to one man, Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker from Melbourne. A man who was born in 1905, who had a wife he was separated from, a man who liked to write poetry. Suddenly, the spectre on the beach had a history. He was no longer a symbol but a person. A man with a job, a broken marriage, a life. But a name is not an answer. It is merely a new, more agonizing question. Knowing he was Carl Webb doesn't tell us why he was in Adelaide. It doesn't explain the untraceable poison that coursed through his veins, a phantom killer that left forensic science helpless. It doesn't unlock the cipher on that scrap of paper, the final desperate message he left for a world that still cannot read it. And it certainly doesn't explain Jessica Thompson's lie. Why would an electrical engineer from Melbourne be so dangerous, so secret that his identity had to be erased and his death covered by a professional wall of silence? We have a name, but we do not have a man. We have a label for the enigma, but the contents remain a black box. The mystery of the Somerton man was never truly about his identity. It was about his purpose. Was he a spy in the nascent Cold War, silenced by his own side or the enemy? Was he a heartbroken man staging an elaborate poetic suicide, or was he something else entirely, a piece in a game so dark we have yet to even understand the rules? The sand of Somerton beach has long since covered his final footprints. The waves whisper, but they tell no secrets. We may know him now as Carl Webb, but the man who died alone, staring out at the dark water, took his truth with him into the silence. And perhaps that is the most chilling possibility of all, that some secrets are meant to be kept. The past holds secrets far worse than this. Subscribe to witness them.